Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a really fascinating journey. We're unpacking the profound philosophical dualities found in Oluyomi Oladevid's poem, Privileges and Returns. You know, what makes her piece so incredibly captivating is how it just completely strips away the noise of everyday life. It literally forces us to look at the raw mechanics of human existence. It's this masterful breakdown of how society, ambition, and responsibility actually function. Let's systematically unpack her vision. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to be looking at your own daily actions in a completely different light.
Speech is a risk, and there are returns. Right off the bat, she establishes a universe totally governed by cause and effect. She's telling us that nothing we put out into the world is neutral, zero. By framing speech as a risk, she emphasizes that our voices are actual investments. And whether the returns on those investments are positive or negative, well, that depends entirely on how deliberately we choose to communicate. It's a pretty powerful reminder that passivity just isn't an option in her framework.
But before we analyze her poetry any further, we really need to establish exactly who is behind these words. Oluyomi Oladevid is a proud Nigerian who is deeply, deeply passionate about generating global development solutions and influencing policy. So she isn't just writing abstractly from a distance, right? She's someone who actively loves people and seeks to provide absolute clarity in a really complex world. Understanding her background is absolutely crucial because it colors every single line she writes. She's observing the world through the lens of a real problem solver.
Actually, she approaches the world not just as a poet, but as a dedicated strategist. She's incredibly concerned about global transformation and actively seeks to influence policy and strategy. But what exactly anchors all of that ambition? Well, it's her faith. She explicitly states that God owns and rules the universe, describing him as the wheel within my wheels. So this means her verses are actually these deliberate, faith-guided contemplations on how we operate, both as individuals and as societies. Her work is essentially a blueprint for living a purposeful life. It's driven by a higher calling, for sure, but firmly planted in practical action.
So how does she define the role and actions of the individual? Let's take a look at how she categorizes the things we possess.
Notice how she brilliantly juxtaposes the material with the immaterial here. On one hand, an asset is a resource and there are users. It's totally transactional. It's passive. It just gets consumed. But on the other hand, she elevates wisdom by stating, counsel is a heritage and there are doers. Counsel isn't just information, it's a legacy passed down. And crucially, it requires doers to actually activate it. You don't just use counsel, you have to embody it, you have to execute it. She's basically asking us, are you just a user of resources or are you a doer of wisdom?
And yet, for all her lofty philosophical and spiritual grounding, she roots her philosophy firmly in everyday reality. I absolutely love this line, "Work is a worthy means and there are bills." It is just so stark and honest. She explicitly ties the dignity and worthiness of work to the very practical, inescapable necessity of paying bills. We all have them, right? She doesn't romanticize labor unnecessarily, and she doesn't dismiss the mundane realities of life either. Instead, she elevates the everyday grind by acknowledging that meeting our responsibilities, paying those bills, is inherently worthy.
This brings us to a bigger picture. How does she view the makeup of our modern society? If the individual is defined by their actions, how do those actions aggregate?
A nation is a common purse where there are builders. This brilliantly illustrates her policy background coming through. Look at how she defines a nation here. It's not defined by geographic borders or even a shared language, but as a common purse reliant on active builders. A common purse implies shared resources, shared economics, and a collective stake in the outcome. But, a purse only grows if there are people actually adding to it. By highlighting the need for builders, she's making a direct call to civic duty. A nation fails if it's just full of consumers. It thrives when its citizens see themselves as the architects of its prosperity.
From the macro level of a nation, she methodically maps out our human environments. She notes that society is a mixed bag, acknowledging the sheer variety of the human experience. But wow, the contrast she draws between the village and the city is stunning. The village is a welcome home, connected to nature and roots, characterized by forests. It implies this deep stability and comfort. The city, however, is a busy street characterized by waiters. And that's such a fascinating word choice, waiters. People waiting for opportunities, serving others in a highly transactional hub, constantly in motion. She perfectly captures the comforting familiarity of rural roots versus the bustling, opportunistic waiting game of urban life.
So having established the self in society, a crucial question arises. What happens when individual vision meets systemic power?
Dream is a motion picture, and there are actors, versus ambition is an open road, and there are pilgrims. This is probably one of the most vivid metaphors in the entire piece. She portrays aspirations as active journeys, but differentiates them beautifully. A dream is a motion picture. It's a projection, it's a script, and it requires actors playing a part to make it look real. But ambition? Ambition is an open road, and there are pilgrims. A pilgrim is someone on a deeply spiritual, committed, and often grueling journey toward a sacred destination. She's telling us that a dream might just be performance art, but true ambition is a lifelong pilgrimage.
Here we see her incredibly sharp observation of authority. She contrasts the restrictive ownership of tyranny against the nurturing environment of benevolence. Tyranny is a boss, and there are slaves. It's this pure extraction of power through force and subjugation. On the flip side, benevolence is a creator, and there are subjects. A creator fosters growth. They build a world for their subjects to inhabit. It really highlights that power itself isn't necessarily the problem, it's the nature of that power, whether it acts as a boss to dictate or as a creator to cultivate, that defines the human experience under it.
Building directly on that concept of power, she offers this absolutely vital insight. Liberty is a sealed pact, and there are benefits. She insists that liberty is not a random occurrence, and it's definitely not our natural default state. It is a deliberate, sealed pact. It requires agreement, vigilance, and mutual respect among a society's members. And the reward for upholding this pact? Tangible benefits. Freedom isn't just some abstract ideal in her worldview. It's a structural agreement that yields very real dividends for everyone involved.
That brings us to the climax of our explainer. What are our responsibilities in the present moment? How do we actually apply these vast concepts to our daily lives?
Privilege is a useful tool, and there are limits. She bluntly reminds us of this undeniable fact. You know, it's so easy to either weaponize privilege or, conversely, feel immense guilt over it. But she takes a remarkably practical stance here. It is simply a tool. It gives you leverage, but she immediately couples it with a warning. There are limits. Privilege can open a door, sure, but it cannot do the work for you once you're inside. It is finite, and relying on it exclusively, well, that's eventually going to lead you to a dead end.
In brilliant contrast to the grand concept of privilege, she likens responsibility to an ant. Think about what an ant represents for a second. It's small, it's unglamorous, maybe even a bit annoying at a picnic. But it is tirelessly, relentlessly working. By embracing this ant-like responsibility, she notes that there are opportunities. It's through the small, consistent, daily carrying of our burdens that we actually unearth new paths and chances for growth. While privilege might have strict limits, the opportunities born of true responsibility are basically boundless.
As she brings her thoughts to a close, she draws this stark line between distraction and presence. Earlier in the poem, she notes that news is a current trend, and there are junks, sort of waving away the fleeting, often toxic nature of the 24-hour news cycle. She beautifully contrasts that junk with the present moment, stating, "Now is an ancient recipe, and there are fruits." The present moment isn't some new fad. It is the exact same crucible where every great achievement in human history has been forged. If you focus on the now, the recipe is proven, and it is ready to bear fruit.
Since she establishes from her very first line that life itself is an endowment, a gift, a sort of starting capital given to you by a creator, we are left with an inescapable question. Through her structured framework of thought, Oyumia Moore-David has shown us the limits of privilege, the dignity of work, and the absolute necessity of being builders in our nation. So, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. If everything you have is an endowment and you are currently holding the useful tool of privilege, what exactly will be the returns you generate today?